Hi, greetings from the Pacific Northwest. Bo here. Going to do a quick video on a brief history of the Old American Basketball Association through cards. We'll do this. I pulled quite a few cards. I don't know how much sense this is going to make. This first one really means nothing other than I just always thought it was interesting that Lonnie Wright here. So Lonnie Wright, he's actually depicted in a the then Denver Rockets. They later changed their name to the Nuggets before the merger. But he was with the Miami Floridians. They were the Florida Floridians at this point. That's him in playing basketball, and that's also him with the Denver Broncos. So two-sport star, Lonnie Wright. Just thought I'd start off with that. So the ABA was the brainchild of Gary Davidson and Dennis Murphy. Dennis Murphy, and you can take what you want from this, but they started a basketball league. They also later started the World Hockey Association, and gave themselves franchise and quickly sold them off. So, you know, you take it for what it was. The ABA stayed around for 9 years. To call it a merger, the NBA would disagree with that. They would actually say that they admitted 4 of the teams as expansion teams into the NBA. And by the time, it started with 11 teams. By the end of the league, there was a lot of franchise movement. The Kentucky Colonels, this is an instance of a team that should have stuck around. John Y. Brown, who later was governor of Kentucky, owned the Kentucky Colonels. They won a championship. They're one of the more successful teams in the league. This is Dan Issel, Hall of Famer, his rookie card. He also played with the Nuggets in the NBA, and his shot was known as Issel Missiles, right? This is his rookie card. But John Y. Brown took a buyout. Later then took the money, bought the Buffalo, I told this in my Buffalo Braves story, bought the Buffalo Braves and then traded to get the Boston Celtics. As the owner of the majority owner of the Celtics wanted to move a team out on the West Coast to San Diego, and he took the Braves, he moved them to San Diego, and they became the Clippers. But anyhow, and John Y. folded his Kentucky franchise and took a buyout. Dan Issel, after winning the championship with Kentucky in '75, John Y. was so cheap, he sold him to the then Baltimore Claws, which is this Memphis pennant you see back here, Memphis Pros. They later changed their name to the Memphis Tams. They started as the New Orleans Buccaneers. When they finished up, they were the Baltimore Claws. They played 2 games in Baltimore. Anyhow, Dan Issel's rookie card. These are all raw. Some of them are in good shape. Some of them are in lousy shape. Rookie card of Movin' Marvin Barnes, or Bad News Barnes as he was known. What a force, what a talent. The Spirits of St. Louis drafted him. They're the old Carolina Cougars franchise, which started out as the Houston Mavericks. He and Ernie DiGregorio, also of the Buffalo Braves fame, led Providence to a Final Four. Marvin had a problem with narcotics, couldn't stay off drugs, was in and out of prison. I know he died not that long ago, and I believe that he may have even been in prison when he passed away. But guy who, if he could have stayed off drugs, you never know what he could have accomplished. The Spirits of St. Louis were considered a pretty wild bunch of young players. They upset the defending champion New York Nets of Dr. J. Julius Erving, knocked them out of the playoffs, and almost beat Kentucky the year Kentucky won the championship before succumbing to them in, I think, 6 games. I think Freddie Lewis, who'd been a big star at Indiana, got hurt. He was with the Spirits, and when they lost him, they kind of lost everything that was giving them momentum. That's Marvin Barnes. Next, Big George McGinnis. Was on those Pacer teams. The Indiana Pacers were kind of the class of the ABA, won 3 championships. He later jumped to the NBA prior to the last season, played with the Sixers. Dr. J, of course, joined the Sixers. They went to the finals in '77, lost to Portland. He ended up traded to Denver, ended up back in Indiana to finish out his career. But George just passed away. But George was a great scorer, tremendous rebounder, force for those old Pacers. This is the first high school player to ever appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated. His name is Rick Mount. Rick Mount, very talented player, played at Purdue, led him to at least one Final Four, maybe 2. Maybe he and Bob Greasy maybe even been teammates. Bob Greasy, the quarterback at Purdue, also played on the basketball team, but I don't know that their time overlapped. Billy Keller, who was his teammate at Purdue, actually became the bigger star with the Pacers. He ends up being moved on to the Kentucky, Rick ends up moving over to Kentucky, then on to Utah, Baltimore. He kind of bounced around the ABA, had a chance to sign with the Rockets after the merger, turned it down, went back to Lebanon, Indiana, where he'd been a high school star and preferred hunting and fishing. But Rick Mount, one of the first, he was the first high school player to appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and kind of a what might have been story, kind of a didn't really actualize his potential. There's another great story. This is Johnny Newman. Johnny Newman has also passed away fairly recently. The guy's nickname was Slick. No, his wife's nickname was Slick. He drove a Pantera. On paper, he was the first $1 million player, was as talented a passer as there was second in the nation in scoring behind Pistol Pete Maravich. This is back when there was no shot clock and no three-point line, and Maravich averaged like 44 points a game. I think Johnny at Ole Miss averaged like 39. When he was in the ABA, his coaches got tired of him. They thought he was being a bit of a ball hog, taking too many shots because he could pass, and they said, "Hey, Johnny, we'd like to see you distribute the ball more." So he went out one game and did nothing but pass the basketball and ended up like 28 assists or something like that. But he refused to shoot because that's the kind of guy Johnny was. Johnny Newman, one of those, it's one of those, just those ABA stories, right? He played with Memphis and a bunch of teams in the ABA. That was him with the Utah Stars there. Okay, so this is the Kangaroo Kid. This is Billy Cunningham. He never actually played with the Spirits of St. Louis, but the Carolina Cougars had moved there. He jumped back to the NBA prior to this. He coached a championship team in Philadelphia with Dr. J. He was a player. I believe he teamed with Wilt on a championship team. Never got a championship with Carolina, but got him to the East Finals. Carolina was a very good team. They had Joe Caldwell. They had Matt Calvin, Jim McDaniels. Good team in Carolina. Never did win a championship. But the Kangaroo Kid, Billy Cunningham, cool card. And this is Doug Moe. Doug Moe was caught up in the same college scandal that Connie Hawkins. Connie Hawkins never had an ABA card, so you won't see one of him here. But Doug Moe got caught up in the same scandal as a lot of Roger Brown and a lot of these guys. And so they were banned from the NBA, so he had to play in the ABA. Doug Moe would be in the Hall of Fame had that not been for being banned. Coached those San Antonio Spurs later in the 70s and 80s with George Gervin and Larry Keenan and the Whopper Billy Paltz. They scored a lot of points. Same when he coached in Denver. The Denver team that he was coaching in the 80s, those guys could flat out score with like Kiki Vandeweghe and Alex English and Dan Issel and Fat Lever. Those guys could score. And his college teammate and best friend, Larry Brown, they both signed at the time with the then New Orleans Buccaneers, and then their careers kind of diverged. Larry Brown is, I believe, one of a few people, maybe was he the first to have won an NCAA championship and an NBA titles. I know he coached the Pistons. I can't remember if the UCLA team he coached actually won or if they lost to Louisville. I don't remember, so I might be misspeaking about his coaching credentials, but he coached Denver in the ABA too. Coached him in the NBA. I remember in '78, he coached the Nuggets. They got to the Western Finals against my favorite team, the Seattle Supersonics. It was a 6-game series. Used to wear overalls on the sidelines. Larry Brown, one of the true innovator coaches, pretty good point guard, pretty decent three-point shooter. And people have heard me talk about this guy in my Supersonics video. This is his ABA card. This is John Brisker. Brisker was known as one of the meanest men in the ABA. Used to get into a lot of fights. One of the toughest men. The Utah Stars actually had Ron Lyle, who was a heavyweight contender, sit on their bench when Pittsburgh was in town. John later played with the Supersonics. He disappeared, and I believe he was killed fighting in the Sudan for Idi Amin, and his body was discovered in a mass grave. Very tragic story. But John Brisker, a guy who could score, flat out score, but the guy who also would fight at the drop of a hat. Another Sonic coach, a lot of Sonics up here. This is George Karl. George Karl got his start as a player in the ABA. Coached a lot of teams in the NBA. Innovator, just kind of a cool card. So George Karl. Wendell Ladner, this is him with the Memphis Tams. He played with a lot of teams. He was kind of known as Julius Erving's bodyguard when they were both with the Nets. Wendell had was kind of known for not being the brightest bulb in the box. I don't know if that corn pone stuff that he was putting on was just for fun or what, but like there's a story about him when he was with the Kentucky Colonels. They were flying into Washington to play the Caps, not the hockey Caps. There was a Washington Caps in the ABA first, and he asked Dan Issel when they saw the Washington Monument if that was the Washington Post. It's just that kind of stuff. Burt Reynolds had a very famous poster back in that era where he was laid out on like a fur rug. Well, Wendell Ladner did the same thing, except he covered up his privates with a red, white, and blue basketball. It's a very popular collector's item. Wendell Ladner, kind of a one-of-a-kind guy. And this guy was known as Captain Late, James Silas. If he doesn't tear up his knee, he's in the Hall of Fame. This guy was a terrific scorer, terrific distributor of the basketball. Those Spurs teams, after the merger too, with Keenan and Gervin and Pultz, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple times, took the Bullets to 7 games. Could very easily have won a championship. I know Seattle, they gave Seattle fits in those days, so I was glad when the Bullets beat them because I didn't want to have to face them. But in the ABA, he earned the nickname of Captain Late because he often hit clutch key shots down the stretch drive of games to win games for those Spurs. James Silas. Kind of a stack here, guys. Sorry. This guy was known as the legend, Ron Boone. Ron Boone actually at one time held the record for consecutive games played. I don't think he ever missed a game in his career. I think Ron Boone gets a bit of a bad reputation or bad turn in that HBO documentary, not documentary, but TV series about the Los Angeles Lakers. I know he's kind of portrayed as being kind of a jerk to Magic. Who knows? I wasn't there. I have no idea what happened. I just know that Ron Boone was a great player, good scorer, had a couple of good years with the Kansas City Kings after the merger. The legend, Ron Boone. He just played hurt. He never missed games. So here we've got Willie Wise. Those Utah Stars, they won a championship. They had a guy named Zelmo Beatty who had played with the St. Louis Hawks. I don't know if he played with them in Atlanta or not. He may have, but they teamed up. Willie Wise came out of Drake University. He was a Seventh-day Adventist. He thought about just driving truck for a living instead of playing basketball. But very excellent defender. He hurt his knee, so he didn't have much of a career after the merger. But this is a guy, had he played in the NBA, he'd be in the Hall of Fame today. Willie Wise, super talented guy. This is the all-time leading scorer in ABA history, Louis Dampier. He played at the University of Kentucky. He spent his whole 9-year career. There were 3 guys that played all 9 years of the ABA. It was Louis Dampier, Byron Beck, and Freddie Lewis. And only 2 of them, being Beck and Dampier, played all 9 years with the same team. Freddie Lewis played with Indiana mostly, but then he bounced around a little bit after that. But Dampier, league's all-time leading scorer. I know Hubie Brown tells a great story about Louis Dampier when he took over as coach of the Colonels. Coming down on the fast break and Dampier running into the corner and hoisting up threes, and he thought that he couldn't believe that was the kind of style of basketball they were playing down there, especially since they had the 2 great post players and Artis Gilmore, who I didn't pull one of his cards. I don't know why I didn't. I just forgot to. But the A-Train and Artis Gilmore, Colonels were the 75 champs, probably the most consistent team in the ABA, and that's the league's all-time leading scorer right there. Played for Rumps in the college, the University of Kentucky. I think we're getting some. Doesn't seem to want to focus too well. Sorry, folks. So Wilt Chamberlain signed a contract to be a player coach with the San Diego Conquistadors, and they billed him as the biggest coach in the league's smallest venue. Because they couldn't get the Qs couldn't get dates at the San Diego Sports Arena, so they had to play at this 4,000 seat stadium. But the Lakers sued, kept him from playing, so all he could do was coach. He and Stan Albeck. A couple of great stories about Wilt when he was coaching. He once dropped a quarter in a hotel lobby. And Stan Albeck, the assistant coach, said, "Hey, Wilt, you dropped the quarter," and Wilt refused to pick it up. And Stan asked him about why in the elevator he wouldn't pick it up. He said, "Because if I stopped to pick up a quarter, people would talk." And another great story was about Wilt Chamberlain was, once asked what sign he was born under, and he said the $sign, baby. What people don't realize today is that Wilt Chamberlain was as strong a guy has ever played in this league, and that includes guys like Shaq. He was a gentle giant, though. Great rebounder, great defender. Won a couple of championships with the Lakers in the NBA. Never actually played in the ABA, but this is a great card. And it's in terrible condition, but I don't care. Wilt Chamberlain with the Qs. This is a rookie card of Rick Barry. Believe it or not, Rick Barry, who played in the NBA first, he jumped to the Oakland Oaks of the ABA because I think his father-in-law was coaching the team, but they fired his father-in-law, and then he got hurt. The team moved to Washington. He didn't want to do that, but he honored his contract. And then the team moved again to Virginia, and he appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated and said, I'm not gonna go play in a place where people say y'all. So they ended up trading him to the New York Nets. He got the Nets to the 72 finals. They lost to the Pacers. He thought about signing and staying in the ABA, but he ended up jumping back to the Warriors and led the Warriors to a 75 NBA championship. Guy that at one time was the record holder for highest free throw percentage. I don't believe that he is currently, but he shot the underhand free throws. Great scorer. Guy who tried to get on coaching. He was a pretty good announcer too. Very intellectual. I had a lot of respect for him growing up. My dad couldn't stand him because I remember in the 75 playoffs against the Seattle Supersonics, he was just killing us. My dad, I never, I was a little kid then, but I remember sitting in my dad's Roadrunner where we're listening to the game on the radio and my mom was in a drugstore. And my dad just using swear words like I had never heard before. I was like 7 years old. Anyhow, Rick Barry. Okay, this is the Raja, Roger Brown. This guy definitely would be in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the ones caught up in the college gambling scandal. These kids were innocent. They got totally blackballed by the NBA. Went on to have some great years in the ABA, played on the 3 championship teams, tremendous scorer. One of the great talents. He was, when the Pacers signed him, it's a great story. Mike Storin, who was the GM, says, hey, give me $500. And they said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go sign our first player. And he went to I think it was the GM plant in Gary, Indiana, and signed Roger Brown to a contract. He told him, hey, if you want to play pro ball, this is going to be your last chance. I know Roger was a little concerned about that. He had seniority with GM and didn't want to give that up, especially because he played in that ABL, the American Basketball League, in the early 60s that didn't even last a season. So this guy should be in the Hall of Fame. It's a joke that he's not. Roger Brown, the Raja. Almost there. So this is a rookie card too. This is the Iceman, George Gervin. Gervin, the ABA was really good at signing young people that, back then the NBA wouldn't sign people until they didn't have to have graduated, but the class that they would have been in college had to have graduated. And the Virginia Squires were really good at finding great talent and then selling it. George was a small start. He and Dr. J teamed up one year with the Squires. The Squires got knocked out in the playoffs. He was just kind of a kid. Julius is then dealt to the Nets, and Earl Foreman, who owned the Squires at the time, made a deal with the San Antonio Spurs because they were going to host the All-Star game, but he would stay with San Antonio until after the All-Star game, and then he would be shipped, even though he'd already sold him to it. The league found out. They tried to put a stop to it, and then the Spurs owner, Angelo Drasso, sued in a Texas court, and the judge in San Antonio called Earl Foreman a goat roper because he wasn't even good enough to rope horses. Said that he finds for Mr. Drassos. Gervin ends up with the Spurs, and the rest is history. Ice had that finger roll, one of the great scorers. Great story. Last but not least, this is a long-ass video. Sorry. This is a rookie card, and it's in terrible shape, but it's a rookie card. I don't care. I have a second-year card, too, and I'm thinking about sending it in to get it graded. But this is the Doc, Dr. J, Julius Erving. To us kids growing up in the 70s, this was the guy. My favorite player was a guy named David Thompson, and David Thompson's rookie card is an NBA card, so I didn't show it, but that was my favorite. My favorite player was Downtown Freddie Brown, the Supersonics, but my favorite other than that was David Thompson. Julius Erving would have been in my top 5. Later, was a big star with the Philadelphia 76ers. Won a pair of ABA titles, though, with the Nets. They won the championships in 74 and 76. Never did quite get the Squires there, but this is a great card. There's a great story that told by Al McGuire when Marquette played his UMass team in the NIT tournament. He'd said to Dean Meminger, who the hell, because Julius Erving was killing him, who the hell is this kid out there? He said, well, that's Julius, coach. And he said, where's he from? He's from the island. He's from New York. And Al was pissed because he's like, hey, I get all the good players from New York. How come I never heard of this kid? But this is Julius Erving, icon. Won the first ever slam dunk contest in the ABA. Just a great card. Anywho, that's it. Short, brief history of the ABA through cards. We will see you next time. Bye. Actually, it's a pretty long history when I didn't even say much.